Previously, Daniel, the billionaire's only son, was disowned, betrayed by his fake friends, and left beaten in the rain. If you missed part 1, you can find it on this channel later to see how it all began. But for now, let's continue this story. The rain poured harder, drumming against Daniel's bare skin as he lay shivering on the cold pavement. His breath came in short, painful gasps, every muscle in his body screaming from the beating. Somewhere in the haze of his mind, he heard footsteps splashing through puddles. "Daniel." The voice was soft, almost uncertain. He forced his swollen eyes open, blinking against the rain, and saw a slim figure standing over him, an umbrella tilted just enough to shield his face from the downpour. It took a moment for him to place her. Her deep brown skin glistened under the streetlight, her hair tied back in a simple bun. She wore a faded red hoodie and jeans, both slightly wet from the rain. Then the memory hit him. Hope Nwachukwu, the girl he once mocked outside Kingsworth. Hope wasn't just any student. She was Daniel's classmate and the brightest in their year. Known for her sharp mind and spotless record, she was the kind of student lecturers quietly admired. But she also worked evenings selling snacks around campus to pay her rent and school fees. Daniel remembered leaning against his G-Wagon one afternoon, Michael and the boys around him, when Hope had passed with her tray of meat pies and drinks. "Imagine," Daniel had said loud enough for her to hear, "all that book knowledge, pleasing lecturers, coming first in class, and still selling meat pies? What's the point?" His friends had laughed, and Hope, face flushed, had walked away without a word. Tonight, the same girl was kneeling beside him, concern clouding her eyes. "What happened to you?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. Daniel tried to speak, but his lips were too dry, his pride too heavy. All that came out was a hoarse whisper, "Nothing. Leave me." Hope ignored him. "You'll die out here." She slid an arm under his shoulder, wincing as she felt his weight. "Come, my place isn't far." He wanted to refuse, but the truth was written in the cold ache of his bones. He had no strength left. Limping beside her under the umbrella, he followed as she led him through narrow streets, past vendors packing up for the night, until they reached a small one-room apartment tucked behind a row of kiosks in Ajegunle. Inside, she lay him on her bed, a thin mattress neatly covered in a clean sheet. She fetched a basin of warm water, gently cleaning the blood from his cuts, and wrapped him in a dry blanket. The room smelled faintly of soap and fried plantain. Daniel stared at the cracked ceiling, his chest tightening with a strange mix of shame and gratitude. No one from his glittering world would ever live like this, yet here he was, saved by the girl he once humiliated. Hope sat quietly in the corner, watching to make sure he was still breathing. The rain's steady rhythm against the tin roof became a lullaby, and for the first time since his mother's death, Daniel fell asleep under the care of someone who expected nothing in return. Before we continue, if you love powerful African stories like this, make sure you subscribe now to African Folktales with Onyi. More inspiring tales are waiting for you. Let's go on. A pale morning light filtered through the thin curtains, spilling across Daniel's face. He stirred, blinking at the low ceiling above him. The muffled sounds of Lagos filled the air. Women calling out prices of tomatoes. A loud bus conductor shouting, "CMS, CMS, straight!" and the sweet, tempting smell of frying akara drifting in through the window. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then the memory hit him, the rain, the beating, and Hope's steady voice calling his name. Daniel tried to sit up, but pain shot through his ribs. He groaned and sank back down. A moment later, Hope entered with a steaming cup of tea and a small loaf of bread. "You should eat," she said simply, setting it beside him. He took the tea reluctantly. "I don't usually drink this." Hope gave a faint smile. "You don't usually wake up in Ajegunle either." Daniel's lips twitched, but he stayed silent. After a moment, she sat on the edge of the bed, her expression calm but direct. "Daniel, what really happened? People on campus are already talking. They say your father kicked you out for living recklessly." He stared at her, the tea warm between his hands. "They are right." Her eyes didn't flinch, so he went on. "He froze all my accounts, took my cars, told me not to come back until I changed my ways. I tried to call my friends, they all turned their backs. I wondered until I ended up in Oberlendi, where some boys decided to finish the job. That's when you found me." Hope looked at him quietly for a moment. "I see." He shifted uncomfortably. "Why help me, after what I said to you?" Her gaze was steady. "Because what you did then says more about who you were, not who you have to be. And I don't help people for revenge." She told her own story, losing both parents at 12, growing up in an orphanage, working in the evenings to afford rent and school fees. "I'm top of the class, not because life is easy, but because I can't afford to fail." Daniel found himself listening in a way he hadn't listened to anyone in years. "You can stay here for a short while," she continued, "but in Ajegunle, nobody survives without working. If you are going to make it, you'll have to start from scratch." Daniel nodded slowly, turning his head to look out the window. The street below was alive. Hawkers weaving between okadas, children darting through puddles, the air buzzing with the pulse of survival. For the first time in his life, he was on the outside looking in, and he had no idea how to survive here. The next morning, Daniel awoke to the clatter of metal spoons against plates and the warm smell of fried eggs drifting in from the tiny kitchen corner. Hope was already dressed in her light blue school blouse, a tray of neatly wrapped snacks balanced on her arm. "You are weak," she said, slipping on her sandals. "I have to sell these before class starts." Daniel rubbed his eyes. "You're going to school like that? Carrying food?" She raised an eyebrow. "That's how I pay my rent and fees. And you," he glanced at the thin blanket still around his shoulders, "can't just sit here all day. You need to find something to do." When she left, Daniel stepped outside. Ajegunle was a symphony of noise, traders shouting over each other, bus conductors hanging from rickety danfos, the smell of roasted corn mixing with exhaust fumes. It felt like another planet compared to the polished streets of Lekki. As he wandered, he spotted an elderly man repairing sandals under a faded umbrella. The man looked up. "Ah, stranger, you are new here, Abi?" Daniel nodded. "Just passing through." The man chuckled. "No one passes through Ajegunle without learning how to survive. Name's Babakunle." He tapped a worn shoe. "Here, we hustle or we go hungry. Doesn't matter if you were a king in your former life." Daniel gave a faint smile, but said nothing. That afternoon, when Hope returned, she handed him a small bag of snacks. "Come on, you're helping me sell these." At the busy bus stop, Daniel felt every stare burn into him. Two boys nearby smirked. "See na the rich boy from Kingsworth wey no fit pass exam, na meat pie dey sell." His cheeks burned. Hope's eyes snapped to the boys. "At least he's doing something honest. What about you? Wasting your life here." The boys muttered and turned away. Still, Daniel's hands shook as he offered snacks to hurried commuters. By the time they returned home, he was sweaty, tired, and humiliated. Over dinner, just boiled yam and palm oil, he stared at the plate. "This is harder than I thought," he admitted. Hope gave a small smile. "Good, that means you are learning." And somewhere inside, Daniel felt it, a spark he hadn't felt in years, the urge to try again, tomorrow. The days began to take on a new rhythm for Daniel. Gone were the late nights in clubs and long mornings in bed. Now his days started with the sound of Hope's voice calling prices on the street and ended with the hum of the generator down the road. At first, helping her sell snacks had been torture, the heat, the stares, the constant movement. But gradually, he found his footing. He learned how to read a customer's face, when to drop the price slightly, when to tease just enough to make them laugh and buy more. One hot afternoon, Daniel's charm paid off. He sold the last of Hope's meat pies before noon, even convincing a Danfo conductor to buy 6 at once for the boys at the park. Hope returned from class and stared at the empty tray in surprise. "You sold everything?" she asked. I grinned. "You are looking at my new sales champion." Hope chuckled, shaking her head. "Maybe you're not completely useless after all." That evening, over a simple dinner of rice and stew, Hope's tone turned serious. "Daniel, you know your father said you can't come back until you graduate with good grades, right?" Daniel sighed. "Yeah, but my grades are bad. Real bad." "I know," Hope said, plainly. "You and I are in the same course, business administration. I'm the best in the class, and I can help you if you're willing to work." The next day, they started. At first, Daniel was restless, distracted by the noise outside and his new small phone, now only useful for offline notes. But Hope was patient, breaking down concepts with real-life examples from the street. Slowly, numbers and theories started to make sense. During one study break, Hope shared her dream. "After school, I want to start a catering business. Not just snacks, full meals, events, maybe even a restaurant one day." Daniel hesitated before speaking. "I've never thought about life without my father's money." "Then maybe it's time you did," she said. Meanwhile, in Lekki, Victoria's claws sank deeper. She stood behind Anthony at his study desk, guiding his hand as he signed documents, giving her partial control of key companies. Later, Kelvin called her. "We need to make sure Daniel never comes back. I have an idea." Back in Ajegunle, Hope packed her books away. "Daniel, start thinking of something you can do for yourself. Not for your father, for you." Daniel nodded slowly. For the first time, he wondered if he could. The weeks rolled by and life in Ajegunle slowly reshaped Daniel. His mornings were spent helping Hope sell snacks at the bus stop, his afternoons buried in business administration textbooks, and his evenings often fixing sandals with Babakunle under the dim glow of a kerosene lamp. The change was slow but steady. Concepts that once seemed impossible began to click in his mind. His test scores crept upward, and Hope's approving nods became more frequent. On the streets, he learned how to spot a potential customer before they even glanced his way, how to stretch 10 naira into 20, and how far a little honesty could go. One hot afternoon, while buying bottled water from his stall in Boundary Market, he overheard 2 men chatting beside him. "That Okafor family is changing, oh," one man said, lowering his voice. "Madam Victoria, they run things. They say Oga not 2 days strong again." The other man snorted. "Run things? She's taking over. My cousin works security at their company, says she's already signing papers in his name." Daniel froze, the bottle of water halfway to his lips. Later, back at Hope's apartment, he told her what he had heard. She listened, brow furrowed. "It matches what I've been hearing in school. But Daniel, the rumors about you are worse." "What rumors?" "That you joined the cult and were caught stealing. Some even say you're hiding from the police." Daniel's chest tightened. He knew exactly whose hand was behind this. "Victoria is making sure my father will never want to see me again." Hope leaned forward. "If your dad believes all this, it won't matter how much you change or how good your grades get, you'll still be shut out." Meanwhile, in Lekki, Victoria and Kelvin sat in the lavish living room, Kelvin's phone glowing with another message from their lawyer. "We need to move faster. Anthony doesn't look well. The sooner we secure everything, the better." Victoria smirked, swirling her wine. "Daniel is finished. By the time I'm done, his own father won't even remember his name." Back in Ajegunle, Daniel stared out the small window, the street noise fading into the background. He couldn't wait for fate to decide his life. "I need to reach my father," he said quietly, "and I need to do it before she destroys everything."
Daniel's decision came without hesitation. One evening, as the noise of Ajegunle faded into the background, he told Hope, "I have to see my father, face to face." Hope folded her arms. "Even if you see him, will he believe you?" "He will, if I can show him I've changed." Hope's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "There's one person who might be able to help, Dr. David Amadi. He's close to your father." Daniel stiffened. "Amadi? That man hates me." "Maybe because you gave him every reason to," she replied. "But if you're serious about turning things around, you'll swallow your pride and apologize." The next morning, they took a bus to Kingsworth University. Daniel walked through the gates, memories of skipped lectures and empty nights hitting him like a wave. They climbed the stairs to the business administration department and stopped outside an office with a polished nameplate. Dr. David Amadi, senior lecturer. Hope knocked. "Come in," came the deep voice from inside. Dr. Amadi looked up from his desk, his eyes narrowing when he saw Daniel. "Well, well, the prodigal student. To what do I owe this visit?" Daniel stood awkwardly. "Sir, I came to apologize for everything. Walking out of your classes, talking back, wasting my time here. I was wrong." The lecturer studied him for a long moment. "You expect me to believe this sudden humility?" Hope stepped forward. "Please, sir, I'm the best student in your class. I've been tutoring him for weeks. He's changed, and he needs your help, not for grades, but for something bigger." Dr. Amadi sat in silence for a moment, his eyes distant in thought. Then, with a slow nod, he finally spoke. "All right, I will hear you out." Daniel told the whole story, the disownment, life in Ajegunle, Victoria's lies, and her plan to take over his father's empire. When he finished, Dr. Amadi leaned back. "Your father will be at a private charity gala in Lekki next weekend. Victoria won't be officially invited. If you want to speak to him without her interference, that's your chance. I can get you in, but if she finds out, you'll be thrown out in seconds." Hope and Daniel expressed their heartfelt gratitude to the lecturer, thanking him for listening patiently and offering his assistance. Meanwhile, in Lekki, Victoria swirled a glass of wine and said to Kelvin over the phone, "I'm attending that gala. Something tells me Daniel might try something stupid." Back in Ajegunle, Daniel and Hope boarded the bus home. For the first time since he was thrown out, the road to Lekki was open. This time, he wasn't going back as the spoiled prince. This time, he was going back to fight for his name. The night air over Lekki was crisp, carrying the scent of salt from the nearby lagoon as Daniel and Hope stepped out of the taxi. The waterfront venue glowed with warm lights, sleek cars pulling up one after another to drop off Lagos's finest, politicians in tailored traditional outfits, socialists in sparkling gowns, and business moguls with entourages.
Dr. David Amadi had pulled through. Dressed in simple black and white, Daniel and Hope blended in with the volunteers arranging desk tables and refilling drinks. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave them freedom to move without drawing suspicion. Inside, chandeliers bathed the marble hall in gold. Waiters moved like clockwork between tables, the air filled with the soft hum of conversation and the gentle notes of a live jazz band. Then he saw him. Anthony Okafor stood near the center of the hall, shaking hands with the governor's aide. His once black hair now showed more silver, and there were deeper lines around his eyes. He looked tired. Daniel's chest tightened. Weeks of planning and waiting condensed into this single moment. He stepped forward, weaving through the crowd. His eyes looked on his father. But just meters away, his path was blocked by a voice dripping with venom. "Well, look who's traded his champagne glass for a serving tray." Daniel froze. Victoria stood before him in a deep red gown, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "You're predictable, Daniel. I knew you'd try something." "I'm here to talk to my father," he said evenly. Her gaze flicked past him. Anthony had noticed him. Their eyes met, a flicker of recognition sparking in his father's face. But before he could move, Victoria stepped into Anthony's line of sight, her voice smooth and urgent as she whispered something in his ear. Anthony's expression shifted, uncertainty clouding his features. Victoria looped her arm through his and began steering him toward the far end of the hall. Daniel pushed after them, but Victoria caught him outside on the terrace. The city lights glimmered behind her as she leaned in. "Go back to your gutter life, Daniel. You'll never step foot in that house again." Her perfume was cloying, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "When your father dies, and that might be sooner than you think, everything will be mine. You'll still be here, hustling meat pies with your street girlfriend." Daniel's fists clenched, but before he could speak, Hope appeared at the doorway, eyes searching his. "Daniel, come inside. She's not worth it. We'll find another way." He looked past her into the hall, just in time to see Anthony leaving early, flanked by security. His heart sank, but the determination in his eyes only sharpened. If Victoria thought this was over, she had no idea what was coming. In the weeks following the gala, Victoria's power inside the Okafor empire had reached its peak. With Anthony frequently absent from the office due to health and rest, she had stepped in as interim CEO, a title she wore like a crown. From the moment she swept into the towering glass headquarters of Okafor Motors and Shipping each morning, she carried herself like a goddess among mortals. Staff who once answered directly to Anthony now bowed to her whims. She spoke to them in clipped, commanding tones, firing anyone she suspected of loyalty to the old guard. A marketing manager who questioned one of her cost-cutting plans was escorted out before lunchtime. Behind closed doors, she was even bolder. Using Anthony's digital signature and her temporary authority, she approved the transfer of millions into Kelvin's private account in small, untraceable installments. Kelvin would message her with a smirk emoji each time the money landed. Anthony, meanwhile, was growing weaker, paler each week, slower to notice the changes in his beloved company. He had started skipping key reports, relying entirely on Victoria's updates during brief dinners at home. It was during one of her so-called strategy meetings in the automobile company's main boardroom that the breaking point came. Anthony had insisted on attending, despite looking worn and tired. He sat at the head of the table, flanked by sleek glass walls and the glow of the Lagos skyline. Victoria was halfway through a presentation about aggressive restructuring when Anthony's eyes glazed over. A light sheen of sweat formed on his forehead. "Anthony?" one executive asked, concerned. He gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady himself, but the room seemed to spin. His voice cracked mid-sentence, and then, before anyone could reach him, he slumped forward, collapsing onto the polished boardroom floor. Across town, Dr. David Amadi was slouched in his office chair at Kingsworth University, barely paying attention to the small TV on his desk. His mind was on lecture notes and grading. Then a breaking news banner flashed across the screen. Anthony Okafor, Africa's leading automobile and shipping magnate, collapses at company headquarters, currently hospitalized. Dr. Amadi sat upright instantly. He grabbed his phone, dialing Daniel's number without hesitation. "Daniel, it's your father. He collapsed in the company boardroom. He's at Lagoon Hospital right now." Within the hour, Daniel and Hope arrived at the hospital, only to find Victoria standing outside the private ward, her voice sharp as she addressed two security guards. "This man," she pointed directly at Daniel, "is not to go near Mr. Okafor. He is a danger to his own father." Daniel's blood boiled, but before he could retort, Dr. Amadi appeared, motioning him down a side corridor. "Come, there's another way in." They slipped through a service entrance, passing a nurse's station, until they reached a quiet room smelling faintly of antiseptic. Anthony lay in the bed, an oxygen tube under his nose, skin pale and still.
The soft beeping of machines filled the silence. Daniel moved closer, his chest tightening as he reached for his father's hand. "I'm not leaving you this time," he whispered. And for the first time in months, the anger between them felt smaller than the bond that still remained.
The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the first sound Anthony heard as he drifted back to consciousness. His eyelids felt heavy, but when they finally opened, the first thing he saw was Daniel, slouched in the chair beside his bed, head bowed in exhaustion. For a moment, Anthony wondered if he was dreaming. "Daniel?" His voice was hoarse. Daniel's head shot up. "I'm here, Dad." Anthony's brow furrowed. "What do you want, if it's money?" "It's not about money," Daniel cut in, leaning forward. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I thought I was going to lose you." Anthony studied his son's face. The defiance that once defined him seemed dimmed, replaced by something quieter. "I've been a fool," Daniel said after a moment. "I wasted every opportunity you gave me. I let my anger over Mom's death turn me into someone you wouldn't be proud of. I'm sorry, Dad." Anthony exhaled slowly, staring at the ceiling. "You think I was the perfect father?" "No, Daniel. I grew up in a one-room mud house in Enugu. My father was a good man, but he couldn't pay my school fees. I dropped out twice. I promised myself that when I had a son, he would never lack anything. But somewhere along the way, I thought money could replace presence." Daniel's throat tightened. "I didn't need all the cars and the money. I needed you." The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was heavy with truths neither had spoken in years. Meanwhile, in another part of Lagos, Hope and Dr. Amadi sat in a dimly lit cafe with Mr. Bassi, a senior accountant at Okafor Motors. He slid a brown envelope across the table. "These are signed transfers. Millions moved from the company account to Kelvin Ume, all authorized by Victoria while Daniel's father was unwell." Hope's eyes widened. "This is enough to clear Daniel's name and remove her from the company." "Use it wisely," Bassi warned. Back at Legon Hospital, Daniel opened up to his father, pouring out everything he had been going through. The life he now lived with Hope in Ajegunle, the hard lessons he had learned along the way, and the pain of enduring Victoria's threats and cruel attitude toward him. Anthony turned to his son. "When I leave here, we'll face her together. No more running, no more fighting alone." Daniel nodded, feeling a weight lift from his chest. Anthony gripped his hand firmly. "This time, son, we fight as a family." The sun was just breaking through the Lagos haze when Anthony returned home from the hospital. Though still regaining his strength, there was a clarity in his eyes that had been missing for months. Daniel, Hope, Dr. Amadi, and Mr. Bassi were already waiting in the study, the brown envelope of evidence on the desk between them. "Dad," Daniel began, "it's time you saw what's really been happening in your company." Anthony opened the file slowly, his expression tightening as he flipped through signed transfer authorizations, bank records, and Kelvin's account statements. This is theft on a scale I've never seen." "It's more than theft, sir," Hope said firmly. "It's betrayal." An emergency board meeting was called that afternoon. The atmosphere in the Okafor Motors and Shipping boardroom was tense. Executives sat rigidly, eyes darting between Anthony and Victoria, who swept in wearing a bright yellow designer dress, chin high. "What's the meaning of this?" she asked sweetly, sliding into her chair. Anthony's voice was calm but cold. "Victoria, you've been transferring millions from the company account to Kelvin Ume. Care to explain?" She let out a light, dismissive laugh. "That's ridiculous. Who is this Kelvin Ume? I don't even know him. Do you have any proof?" Mr. Bassi stepped forward and laid the documents on the table, all authorized by you as interim CEO. For the first time, a flicker of panic crossed her face. "This could be forged." Before she could finish, two men in white coats entered. "Mr. Okafor," one of the doctors from Legon Hospital said, "we thought you should know. The toxicology results from your blood tests have come back. You are being slowly poisoned. The substance would mimic heart failure over time." Gasps filled the room. Anthony's gaze locked on Victoria. "How long?" The doctor said. "Months. Enough to explain your recent health decline." That was all the police officers in the corner needed to hear. They stepped forward, handcuffs at the ready. "Victoria Anozi, you are under arrest for attempted murder, corporate fraud, and conspiracy." She turned to Anthony, her voice breaking. "Anthony, listen." But he didn't flinch. "Take her away." The next day, Kelvin was arrested at a high-end bar in Ikoyi, still wearing a gold watch but with stolen money. The court process was swift. With overwhelming evidence, both were sentenced to 20 years in prison. Standing on the courthouse steps, Anthony put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Your name is clear now. It's time to finish what you started." Daniel nodded. The fight was over. Now it was time to build. The morning sun spilled across Hope's small apartment as Daniel sat beside her, both staring at the laptop screen. The university's result portal refreshed slowly, as if savoring the suspense. Then the grades appeared. Daniel blinked twice, hardly believing his eyes. Second-class upper, 2-1. Hope's squeal cut through the quiet as she clicked to her own profile. First-class honors. She jumped up, hugging him so tightly he could barely breathe. "You did it," she laughed. "We did it." That evening, they celebrated with Dr. Amadi and Anthony in the Okafor mansion dining room. Anthony's smile was the brightest Daniel had seen in years. "I'm proud of you, son. Not for the grades alone, but for the man you've become." In the months that followed, Daniel threw himself into his next dream. Drawing on the skills he'd learned from Baba Kunle in Ajegunle, he launched Okafor Leather and Footwear Limited, a brand blending street craftsmanship with high-end design. Anthony backed him financially, but let Daniel run it independently. The first collection sold out within weeks. Hope's dream also came to life. With Anthony's help and her own savings, she opened Hope's Table, the largest and most stylish snack, cake and light meal restaurant in Lagos. Celebrities posted selfies with her cakes, and customers queued outside daily. Then came the night cruise. Under the shimmering Lagos skyline, Daniel led Hope to the deck, a small jazz band playing in the background. "Hope," he began, his voice steady but warm. "You didn't just save my life, you gave it purpose. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as he opened a small velvet box, revealing a glittering diamond ring. "Yes, Daniel, 1,000 times yes." Their wedding months later was a dazzling blend of elegance and tradition at the Echo Hotels and Suites. Dignitaries, family, and loyal company staff filled the hall. Even Michael, Chris, and Richard came, their faces lined with regret. "We were wrong, Daniel," Michael admitted quietly. "We abandoned you." Daniel clasped their shoulders. "We all make mistakes. Start fresh. I'll help you, but build something you can be proud of." At the reception, Daniel stood before the guests, hand in hand with Hope. "I was a man who had everything, but valued nothing. Life took it all away and gave me what mattered most. I thank my father for teaching me resilience, Dr. Amadi for showing me guidance, and Hope for showing me love without conditions. If you're struggling, don't give up. Change is possible, growth is possible, and love is worth fighting for." He smiled at the applause, then looked straight into the camera, filming the event. And to everyone watching this story, subscribe to this YouTube channel, African Folk Tales with Oni, turn on your notification bell, and leave a comment about what you think. Your next chapter might be the one that changes your life. Under the warm lights and soft music, Daniel and Hope danced. Two souls who had walked through storms and stepped into their own bright dawn. The end. Hope you loved this story. Don't miss out. Click the next video now for more mind-blowing African folk tales with Oni.